Hello, good afternoon, and welcome to this Scale live show. My name is Alastair Cole. I'm a computer scientist and artificial intelligence graduate. I spent 10 years as a software engineer, and since then, I've repeatedly used cutting edge technology to transform organizations and help them grow to acquisition. Now, I'm a co founder and value partner governance for Scale. We build AI capability for regulated SaaS businesses with clarity, control, and confidence. And today's show is all about the EU AI Act, which comes fully into force this Sunday. And there's a real risk reward going on with AI at the moment, which we're going to be getting into today, not only the legislation, but also how it's affecting and improving businesses across the UK. I'm delighted to tell you that I'm joined today by three fantastic guests, Isabel Bathurst, Wendy, Edie, and Kevin Bates. Good afternoon. Hi.
Good afternoon.
Hi there.
Hi, Alastair.
Hi, Kevin. Thank you so much, all of you, for joining and providing such a different and kind of complementary viewpoint in terms of AI. We're gonna work around the three of you now and say hello. So we're going to start with you, Isabel. So you and I have known each other for a little while. You're an international lawyer and AI law tech CEO, the owner and founder of Legal AI, your digital legal assistant. Please, in your own words, tell us a little bit about your journey to this point, Isabel, and what's going on in your business in the world of AI.
So I've been a lawyer quite a long time, and I think one of the major developments I've seen in my time as a lawyer is technology, and with AI, it's a real opportunity for lawyers. So I saw the difficulties that technology had for lawyers, and that's why I set up Legal AI and the Legal AI group to look at the workflows and work streams. And I'm interested as to what the new legislation brings for us as a company and my insights as a lawyer with that.
Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. We're going to get into it. I mean, there's been a lot of toing and froing over the last 2 years since the legislation kind of first arrived. Thanks, Isabel. Let's move on. So, Wendy, again, thanks for joining us. You're a tech CEO, of a regulated tech business and a leader, the CEO of Ecom Learning Solutions. So, very looking forward to your learning and assessment and your kind of deep tech knowledge. So please tell our audience a little bit about you and your journey here.
Sure. Yeah, thank you. So at Ecom Learning Solutions, we do spend a lot of time helping organisations sort of translate governance requirements into practical digital solutions. So what that means in this context, anyway, for today is that we're supporting organisations to develop the knowledge, the skills, and the governance needed to adopt AI safely and responsibly. Because we work with employers across a range of sectors, so we see what good practice looks like and where organisations are maybe still trying to bridge the gap between policy and practice.
Yeah, it's bridging that gap. It's that tension that is the one of the really fascinating things. Thanks, Wendy. And then Kevin Bates, you're a procurement specialist, Kevin, supply chain leader of many years and the founder and chief executive of Quantum 360.
Yeah.
Please tell us a little bit more about your journey here and your what's happening with AI in your world.
Thanks, Alastair, and it's a pleasure to be here. I spend my time helping organisations improve on commercial performance through procurement, technology, and transformation. Now, procurement itself has a huge role around AI, not only on implementation of AI across organisations, but also it's a real big opportunity in the function itself. I have the added benefit, I guess, of not only helping organisations procure AI tech solutions, but I've been developing our own commercial operating platform that has AI embedded right from the outset. So I guess part of me being here today is to bring some of that experience of developing a system myself, but also how organizations can best define, deliver, and get value, real value, out of AI solutions that they bring into their business. And that's what I'm hoping to share. So the key thing for me is it's not just around algorithms. It's not just around, our RPAs. This is really around an end-to-end organizational transformation program, which is really, really critical. And I don't think everyone really fully understands that, Alastair.
No, you touched on so many things there. We probably get into that in its own show. And what I love about the similarity here is that all three of you are building AI into your own technical solutions as well. So you're practitioners as well as advocates and theoreticians. So you've kind of answered my opening question there, Kevin, which is fantastic, around what's happening, because your focus has long been about value, procurement as a driver of value. Wendy, let me just come back to you then, and I've seen that you've recently been talking a lot about kind of secure assessment, because that is your forte. You're heavily regulated, assessing AI literacy and competence. How are you seeing the changes in that assessment as a result of the arrival of AI? How much AI are you building into your products, and how are you using it, and also how are you measuring competence in other businesses?
That's quite a few questions, actually. When we're looking at the security of the assessments, for instance, when we were talking about like one size doesn't fit all, this is a little bit the same when it comes to AI literacy. The obligation is deliberately proportionate. So the expectation, isn't that every exam hits like the hyper secure levels where you've got to get your pass like that. And the same as with AI, we're not expecting everyone to be an AI expert. It's all about proportionality and just ensuring that the people have sufficient AI literacy and take into account the role and the systems that are involved and the potential impact on individuals' business. Because we're working within regulated within regulated environments, we really do need to understand where it's being used, where it's not being used, and known where those guardrails are and where it stops and starts, because we need to report on that. And that's something that's the governance. That's we're starting to get into proportionality. And it'd be interesting to hear from Kevin's point of view, if you're procuring, I don't know, stationery or something, you're not going to need to have understanding of where the AI is being used for that. But if you're maybe for us, buying learning management system or a high stakes assessment platform, you're going to have to really be aware of where all the AI is being used and how it's being used.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I just come in, Alastair, on that point?
Please, that's why you're here.
I think the fact that procurement should never be seen as buying stationery only and things like that. I mean, it's a strategic function that should be driven right across the business. Wendy, I know you wasn't trying to say anything about that anyway, but it should be a strategic function right across the business. And as such, and because a lot of AI coming into businesses is through the third-party supply chain, ultimately. So driving that, having that visibility, and having the capability to be able to understand where the market's going, what you're trying to buy, and how you're going to get the benefits from delivering solutions is really, really critical. I think procurement has a massive opportunity, but it is also something that it needs to be driving and delivering on across all businesses to help drive efficiency.
Yeah. No, totally. And I'm delighted that kind of sets up some of the questions. We've got 50 minutes to get into these. I'm really excited to move on. But before we do, I just want to kind of go back to Isabel and ask you a question before we get into some of the legalese, because you are a practicing international lawyer. So I want to get your view there. But before we do, you talked a lot about AI and governance and technology policy, obviously, recently, Isabel. Do you think the growing kind of political focus on AI is having an impact and changing what leadership and influence looks like inside the legal profession, but also all professions. What do you see happening?
I think that's really interesting because, of course, we do have an EU AI Act, but we don't have an UK AI Act. And regulation and governance is different between the two. But what we are looking at here is what are the EU obligations. And as I think you just highlighted, Wendy, that's very much on AI literacy. And I think, as Kevin was saying as well, it's the whole procurement part of it. We're starting to be required to look at the whole of our processes and to be documenting them. From a legal point of view, it's kind of music to our ears in a way, because we get that scrutiny and oversight of what's there. I think lawyers have been criticised for using AI badly with hallucinations for legal casework, whereas actually if it's documented and used well, transparently and openly, you can start to use it in cases of workflow that are really beneficial and useful. The overarching government policy here is to use it and to use it well. And I think that's what we're starting to see. So I think what you said about procurement and documentation is fundamental, but so is the AI literacy, the understanding of what you're using it for, how, where, when, and why. And I think all of that's really important.
Yeah, and I saw in the news yesterday, I think PwC in the Middle East have been called out because their thought leadership white paper was 100% AI, generated, and their response was basically we're going to we'll change a few of the citations. They're looking to mitigate that, but I'm sure that heads will be rolling, I'm sure now. And as a Guardian journalist, I think from the Netherlands or Belgium, who I'm not sure if he's still suspended, but he was, and so we're moving from just using the AI into if you're not checking your work thoroughly and you're not using that the full governance that you should be, then you're going to get into hot water. Right, before we go any further, you were at pains, Isabel, to clarify with me beforehand that nothing on this show is legal advice, right?
I'm not giving legal advice. It's an overview and oversight. My opinions are my own. I can direct to the right legal advice on these issues, but it's a real conversation about real laws. I can give practical tips, but not legal advice.
Yeah, and so the EUA Act, which came into force on 1st of August, almost exactly 2 years ago, 2024. There's this deadline now on Sunday where it's, as you say, getting its teeth. The fines and the legislation is now coming in, and it's not just on Sunday. There's also the 2nd of there's a December date, and then there's August next year. So there are multiple dates, and I followed the Omnibus Act coming through in May and then into force just a few days ago. I think 27th of July, that Omnibus Act came in, basically kind of relaxing, I think, realizing that some of the more high risk stuff, it just wasn't realistic for those businesses across Europe to adhere to.
That's not there yet, but it's coming.
Yeah.
But what is there will inform and enable that whole procurement process to be put in place functionally. So what we do have enables that. Don't sit on your laurels. What I'd say, use this legislation that is coming in to get everything in place. Yeah,
absolutely. And they've moved things around the EU in order to facilitate business. And like you said, this is the EUA Act, right? And we could probably talk for an hour about, the US versus China versus Europe versus the UK in terms of legislation and innovation and whether we're doing enough for our businesses. But that's a separate topic. But UK businesses trading into Europe are affected by this, right? Immediately, as of Sunday, they can be, be fined. So it's a big deal. And like you say, it would be easy for businesses to say, oh, it doesn't account to me because it's coming later. But these things come around pretty fast, and so action needs to be taken now. So at the top of the call, I explained that we're live on LinkedIn, we're live on YouTube. And if you want to fire into the LinkedIn comments and leave a question for one of our experts, feel free to do that. Like I said, I'm a co-founder, a value partner in charge of governance at Scale, which is a business that I launched with 5 co-founders. We have extensive experience working with regulated SaaS businesses, and that's what we do. We build AI capability across the board for regulated SaaS businesses. So that's a little bit about why we're here. We've talked a bit about why we're choosing this topic, and for me, there are five kind of areas I want to get into over the next kind of 40 minutes or so, and leave some time for questions. And that is, number one, what really changes, right, on Monday when we all come into work. Two, which is a visibility gap. So where is AI really being used? How important is it to know how AI is being used across your business? The third area is the training and genuine competence. You see a lot of news stories of people just burned out because they're just being asked to go on another round of AI training, which obviously, is worrying, because are they really getting those skills? And you'll be able to help us heavily with that, Wendy. The fourth area is what buyers and suppliers need to prove, right, in order that they don't fall foul of these regulations and general governance around AI and technology. And the last area is the evidence gap. So what can businesses actually prove that they're doing, and how do they do that? So that first area, which is what really changes, I saw a stat from the World Benchmarking Alliance reported by Reuters in February that was that only 10% of 200 major tech companies surveyed said they had any internal AI governance mechanisms, which scared the bejesus out of me, because the acts in force is getting more powerful all the time. So Isabel, with your legal expertise, are you able to strip away the complexity for us and explain kind of what obligations already apply, and what changes on the 2nd of August and what has a longer implementation timeline?
I'm going to try and make it non-legal.
Yes, excellent.
So the harmful uses have been in place, and so has the duty to make sure that your people are AI literate. The rules for AI general purpose models are also enforced since August 2025. But what's new is that active enforcement and fines begin. But what for? It's really the AI office powers, what the authorities can look at in terms of operational powers, and to penalise non-compliance with those duties, and accountability with financial penalties that can be quite high. But it's the AI literacy oversight that I think Wendy mentioned particularly earlier on, and those transparency obligations, where they relate to are your human-machine interaction, deepfake disclosure, and the biometric and emotional recognition, and when you're being transparent about those. So that's what's coming in force, as we say, Sunday, effectively Monday. What was delayed, the digital omnibus adjustments, are the generative AI watermarking, and that's got a grace period, as has the high-risk AI systems. That's been postponed to longer, into 27, with the embedded high-risk being AI being postponed until the 2nd of August 2028. So what we're left with, in some, is the chatbot and emotional disclosure parts under Article 50. Those are fully enforceable, as are the AI office enforcement and fines. Yeah.
Well, that is very helpful. Thank you. Very helpful indeed. And I think it feels like it's a moving feast to me. The Omnibus Act moving things around. Things are kind of moving, and it must be confusing for businesses. If there any areas you think they're most likely to miss, or what would be your guess as what people would most likely fall foul of?
I think the concern is it's getting too embedded in the legislation. EU legislation can be cumbersome and difficult to work through. And I'd focus on exactly what those elements, as I said, on the ChatGPT and the emotional interaction and the disclosures, because it is an EU act. We do have to comply. But if you recall what happened under GDPR, it's actually not dissimilar. I'd avoid wading into the legislation and just follow putting in place documentation of your processing systems. And it's that then I can give a plug for someone like Kevin to enable you to document that in your systems, because that's where the guidance is. This is actually, in my view, documenting compliance, procurement well. And if you're not able to evidence that simply by your documents and processes, then you will be fined. But if you follow those basic principles and cut away the noise of what the Act's saying, it has been simplified. It is quite straightforward when you strip it away. The difficult stuff isn't there yet. It will come, but it's not there yet. And by preparing in the way that we've said we're going to say today, then that will go a long way to being a lot less of a headache.
Thank you. Yeah, a lot less of a headache sounds like absolutely where a lot of business will be. And I've been talking to people about this deadline for a while, and I'm, you know, a lot of people seem to be ignoring it. You know, like they haven't really taken it that seriously. They're not really looking at it, and obviously, you know, I would imagine that will start to change right after Monday. So now is the time to get going. So you mentioned in there, Isabel, about literacy, right? And that's absolutely critical. Wendy, you know, AI literacy obligations, as Isabel's talked about, you know, they've applied since February 2025. What should responsible employers already have done, you know, by Monday, in order to demonstrate that it's taken that responsibility seriously? What should they be doing to ensure literacy?
Yes, well, we're a responsible employer, I hope, as well. So we're looking to move beyond that awareness raising and into demonstrating that AI literacy is embedded in how we and they operate. So I think by now, you know, employers should have a full understanding of where AI is being used across their organisation. And I don't mean just, you know, the AI tools that have been formally procured, but also the ones that are embedded features just in everyday software tools, and the one even employees may be using themselves. They should, and I think also we need to look at roles as well, which, you know, what AI knowledge is required when, you know, a board member overseeing AI risks, or a developer building AI systems, or an HR professional using AI for training or recruitment. They all require different things and different responsibilities. So looking at across the board in the organisation, and just providing appropriate guidance and training, covering not just how to use the tools, but the risks and, you know, like we've already mentioned, any of the accuracy, the hallucinations, the bias, confidentiality, data protection, I mean, all those things. Ultimately, just demonstrating a serious commitment to AI literacy. It's not really about proving that everyone's completed a course. It's just showing that people have got the knowledge, support, and the judgment to use AI responsibly in the context of their role. Yeah.
You talked about people using their own tools, and one of the stats that I find most powerful is like 78% of people admit to bringing, you know, using shadow AI, right? And how, you know, I don't know if you've got experience, Wendy, of how is it possible for organizations to kind of identify that or really get the real picture? Is that something that's possible, or does that have to come through, you know, different route rather than kind of online surveys? How do you have any guidance on how shadow AI can kind of have a light shone on it?
Yeah, I suppose you need to have a really the strongest organisations have created a culture where employees feel able to disclose the use of AI, and ask questions and experiment responsibly. And if people are hiding that AI use, the organisation loses visibility and just cannot manage the risks there. So I think that's what we need to look at. If the AI policy is making employees hide their AI use, we've created a governance blind spot, and we need openness and responsible experimentation. But really, in innovative companies, that, you know, that's one of their things, I suppose. You know, you get to be able to be open, and there's no blame or rush to conceal anything when it comes to experimentation.
Yeah. No, I think you've nailed it. For me, it's culture, right? And if you've got good culture, and the best organizations I've worked at, the most amazing ones, that great culture has come from the very top. and there's been a culture of able to share failures and talk about vulnerabilities and their openness, right? So that everything is out in the open, because people, they take risks, they tell lies, they at work sometimes that happens, right? And I think the danger is that obviously AI is so powerful. 9 seconds was all it took for an agent to delete the customer database for Pocket OS about 6 months ago. And so the dangers of shadow AI. So having a culture of openness is so important, given the power of AI. And then Kevin, while we're on this, regardless of the finer points of the legal timetable, what are customers and procurement teams likely to expect SaaS suppliers to demonstrate now? What are they going to expect looking down the supply chain when they're buying AI platforms?
Well, yeah, I think it goes back to what is it we're buying, and being really clear and understand what data we have or they have, what models they're using or sitting behind it, and who is essentially accountable if and when something goes wrong. So for me, it starts with sort of transparency. A supplier should be able to explain exactly what AI is being used, what it's being used for, which third parties are involved, and what sort of type of data it accesses. We need to ensure, all organizations need to ensure that they've got a very clear governance structure in place, named accountability, risk assessments. So I don't think it's around discouraging the use of AI. I think organizations should embrace it because it's here, it's coming, and it's going to be a big thing over the future anyway. It's how organizations actually implement it and actually get the benefits back as well, Alastair, because if individuals are using general purpose AI tools, the business is not necessarily getting the benefit. The individual might be, but the business is not. Yeah. So having a real mature thought process and strategy around how AI will enable a business to drive real benefit, I think is really, really key. And then from a procurement perspective, once you've got these AI solutions in and they're connected to your data sets, whether it's an ERP solution or multiple other data sets, it's really around how you monitor that and how you manage that supplier delivering that. So how you monitor changes to the model, because changes may have different data sets being added to it. You need to be really understanding about what that means. And yeah, it's, for me, that bit around the wrong data coming through and people relying on it as well, how you manage that, how you deal with it going forward is one of the biggest unknowns I think at the moment. But it all comes back to really grown up partnership type relationships between suppliers and the end customer, ultimately, with a real shared vision of what you're trying to achieve. It's not always going to work first time and the right time. So it's about doing it effective and well.
Yeah. Thank you. That's great. We'll move on to kind of topic question number 2, which is around this visibility gap. We've touched on it a little bit, but we want to get a bit deeper, which is, where it's actually being used. And as I mentioned, shadow AI is a big deal, and I think part of that is that people are either they're embarrassed to say they're using it, or they're embarrassed to say they're not sure how to use it properly. And human beings are, we're feeling machines at the end of the day, and this is exciting new technology, but there's that risk and reward that we've talked about. And so really understanding genuinely where it's being used, right? And the question that we ask clients is, can your leadership team produce a credible map of where AI is being used today, including shadow unofficial usage, and through the third party platforms? So, let's keep going with you, Kevin. So from that procurement and operating model perspective, in terms of understanding the full view, what role does procurement have to play in ensuring that the kind of everyday employee purchases are in line with the governance and with the purchasing policies as well as the AI policies?
Yeah, sure. I would say most organizations probably have more AI being used in their business than what they're aware of, and certainly what the contract register information is saying, and also what the spend analysis would be saying as well, because we just talked about general purpose AI tools that might be a cost to an individual as opposed to a cost to a business. So I think the key thing or key role procurement can play in this is working across the business. So this is across all contacts across the business. And it's not just a review of major technology contracts. We really need to understand what enterprise software is across the organization, what software consultancies potentially are using, and subcontractors, looking at online subscriptions, and really trying to sort of map through as much as you possibly can to understand whether there is AI being used and embedded in an organization. So maybe a starting point, and this links to sort of data and IT systems anyway, but maybe a starting point is actually creating like an AI register where all individuals have the opportunity to share that information in. And it goes back to the point you made a few moments ago about, it's not about discouraging AI, it's about using and encouraging it, but being clear what it is you're using and how it's benefiting. But yeah, it's really around that sort of AI register, and then creating sort of risk analysis against that as well. And focusing on the higher risk contracts, the ones that have, some of the high risk data elements, which are part of the Act that we need to be really, really aware of. So the other thing that's very important, and I say this across all procurement and governance and controls, is that it's all proportionate and its risk is managed, not risk averse. So don't be scared about the fact that you're using AI tools, but be aware of it and manage it accordingly.
Well, that's it. It's this risk reward, right? It's the risk and the value. You've got to do it. You've got to do it carefully. You've got to treat it, professionally. You mentioned a few times there, Kevin, about encouraging, right? Encouraging people to do stuff. Wendy, you're an expert in online learning platforms and building capability within people. How do you go about encouraging employees to disclose they're using AI without creating the fear, the blame, rush to concealing experimentation? I know that we talked about having a good culture is important, but what are the best ways to measure how competent people are using AI, and how do you get them to be honest about their level of expertise and their usage?
Yeah, as you said, it's the obligation again is deliberately proportionate, and I think there's maybe I seem to find that people are either feel like they need to be like an AI expert, and really everybody, they don't need to know the same things. We just need to, as I mentioned before, everybody needs to know just enough to use the AI responsibly in the decisions that they're responsible for. So I think getting that sort of role-based AI literacy, which does mean that not everybody's going to get the same material. We mentioned about GDPR, and that does, from my experience, everybody does tend to just get the same GDPR training for compliance purposes. But I think AI has just got so much more complexity to it, and risks are potentially even higher. We need to then look at, well, who needs to know what, and get the risk and the responsibilities associated with the roles. Because I think it scares people a lot, and then they feel like they've got to be AI expert to do that. So I'm really looking at having an audit there. I think then you can cross-reference that with the roles and responsibilities in your organisation and make sure that people are being trained at the right level, I suppose, and just not overwhelm them. but it is becoming part of, you know, that whole evidence piece of workforce competence. And AI is becoming a normal part of that kind of supplier assurance, particularly where suppliers are developing or deploying or using AI, and that it could affect customers and employees or just important business decisions.
Yeah. And are you an advocate for, you know, a smaller pockets of kind of super users, or for the entire organizations to kind of move up and build their competence maybe at a slower rate but more comprehensively? What's the balance between kind of, you know, because often in organizations someone gets appointed as the champion and they get their mates together and they create this super group and they're miles away and the rest of the organization is left behind, and that creates tension. How do you get around that?
Yeah, I think, as I say, looking at that whole, you know, the evidence of workforce and general competence, it needs to be embedded in there. So we build a lot of competency management systems, and they're all role-based. And we just need to be able to bring some of that and very AI specific into competencies within those roles. So it means that you've not got a team that's tearing away with it, because if it's all just down to individuals, and this goes for any skill within an organisation, not just about AI, but if you've got a team that's very, very ahead of the game and the like driving digital transformation, and they leave, you know, that pulls that entire business strategy away, and it's really only down to individuals. Really, well, that's a risk in itself.
Yeah, well, that happens, doesn't it? That team gets super skilled and then they get hired, you know, on a 50% via pay rise. So thank you both. That's really helpful. And then Isabel, as we're talking about this competence right now, what's the significance? What are the legal and regulatory, you know, issues or significance of not knowing how AI is being used across the entire organization and with customers? What are the implications?
Not knowing is very significant. The obligations attach whether or not you realised AI was involved or not. We didn't know is not a defence if you're deploying AI systems, and the literacy, transparency and human oversight duties are your responsibility, and that's very clear. And I think the EU pillars are quite concrete about that. So I think everything that Wendy's just said was spot on, actually, because it really is about maintaining that you've got an openness and awareness of what's being used, and you can document what it is, what everyone's using. We should be using it. It's here. It's here to stay, but we should be using it well. And I think as an organisation, you should know what systems anyone in your organisation is using at any time, and it should be rolled out effectively, well documented. I like the idea of your register, Kevin. I think that's a really good way of putting it together, because I think it gets everybody's buy-in.
Yeah.
And that responsibility line and accountability, instead of it being legal and what have you, it becomes part of what everyone's doing, and a culture where everyone's using it and everyone's taking part. You're able to satisfy the obligation by all of that. It doesn't have to be a legalistic approach. It can be, let's just embrace it well, know what we need to know and get on with it. But let's make sure that we know what those obligations are, document it well, and actually be aware of the uses at all times by everyone.
Thanks, Isabel. I mean, that's probably a good moment for you to mention that Scale has a scorecard, an AI risk and value scorecard, that allows us to continually measure AI initiatives to work out which should be scaled, fixed, or stopped. We measure 8 areas across the business, from cultural capability, governance, technical elements. So we have 80 questions that are a part of that scorecard, and you can read more about that at scalewithai.com/scorecard. Let's move on to our third area, which is about, you know, continuing our chat on training and genuine competence, right? Because I read recently that only 21% of people surveyed in the UK felt confident about using AI at work, and that was shocking to me, because I feel more confident in that, but we're right at the cutting edge, and there are so many people that aren't. And I think often it's easy for us to be in this kind of AI bubble where the news we're reading and the experiments that we're doing make us feel like everybody's got it, but they haven't, right? There's so many people that aren't there, and organizations have got to build that capability as well as measuring it, right? Wendy, you talked about role-based assessment of competence, and I think that's really important, because specifically with this tool, it's so powerful and it's going to be so pervasive that we've got to get into the detail. We've got to understand people's capability across different roles. How does that work? How does it differ for directors or developers or HR teams? How does that role-based competence work, Wendy?
Yeah, so I think it is, again, talking about AI governance as part of that organisational resilience. And if you can't evidence that your own people are competent to use AI responsibly, it does become a bit harder to reassure, well, customers and regulators for us and business partners that your AI risks are under control. So we have to evidence them in some way, and show that there's competency, there's appropriately trained and operating within a robust governance framework. To me, that's what responsible AI, for literacy use is. Evidence-wise, we're looking at updated policies, onboarding materials. These are all coming through, the learning management systems and the competency management systems, leadership reporting, assurance processes, and examples on how the trainings influence behavioural change and reduced risk. But there should be a plan for capability current, because AI literacy is not a one-off exercise. It's going to keep going forward, and I think that's going to be the hardest challenge. You can't. GDPR was kind of in a box, and that was it. If we're using that as a comparison, but this is moving at pace, and so you can't just say, right, there we go. That's the competency standard for this. This is going to keep moving forward.
Yeah, it's got to be continuous. All the new models, all the new practices, it's crazy. And so I'm assuming your business is responding to that in terms of assessing and you're building all that in. So that's absolutely fascinating. And you're talking about competence there of staff. Kevin, in terms of procurement teams, what do procurement teams, how skilled up do procurement teams need to be in order that they're able to properly evaluate the AI enablement within the products and services they're buying? How do procurement teams need to be AI Jedis in order to oversee that?
No, not at all. It's the same as buying any sort of strategic services across an organization. They don't need to be AI data scientists, but they do need to be AI aware, and they need to have enough competence to really understand what it is they're buying and working with the business, because the business will normally have technical leads that will be the specialists in this. And it's also bringing in that specialist advice as and when needed. So whether it's tech specialists or whether it's lawyers, really recognizing the need to have a wider team that is involved in buying these things. I guess the key things for me, though, are really understanding what the intended use of AI is. That's really, really critical. How it can influence outcomes, and really around what is it you're trying to use it for, in a sense of, I've got a real strong view on AI as an enabler, but you can't replace human intelligence as well. And it's getting that right. So AI should help with processes. It should be more like your assistant, if you like, as opposed to you're relying on decision making. I mean, there's various different things you can use it for anyway. But if I look at it from our perspective, we've built a end-to-end commercial lifecycle using AI, and the focus is really around 60% through AI enabled, and part of that's around removing and reducing bureaucracy right across the board. But the key decision points, key approval points, still become a human intervention, a human decision, and I think that's critical. So you've got the two things. You've got, when you're buying contracts or buying services, you need to have enough in terms of understanding and be able to challenge suppliers. Not only challenge suppliers through the tender process, you also need to be able to help challenge the individuals inside your organization around the scope documents they prepare in the first place, the questions and the criteria they raise in terms of how they're going to evaluate the solution. So a large part of it goes back to market engagement, really understand the market before you go out. And then when you're managing those contracts, again, really understand exactly what the intended use of that AI tool is, what the benefits you're supposed to have achieved from it, and that you're tracking those benefits as well. The compliance around data and all that sort of stuff, that's part of what should be done anyway in managing any contracts. The issue, I guess, is in a lot of organizations, contract management is not a area that's focused on as much as the procurement process itself. And I think this is actually going to shine the light on issues as and when they happen. Organizations are going to get themselves in quite a lot of potential trouble from it.
Yeah, it feels to me like it's this specificity, right? We've got the law coming in a couple of days, or getting more teeth in a couple of days. These other deadlines coming down. Wendy's talking about, the outcomes of behaviour change outcomes. It's very specific. It's the same with you, Kevin, and then Isabel. This, the law is very, very clear about appropriate level of AI literacy. This is all about appropriateness, specificity, like personalisation, right? We're really getting down to the details and the nuts and bolts. So, Isabel, what's your, rather than how should organizations interpret that requirement? How do we work out what is appropriate for an individual role?
I think it's treating AI literacy as a flexible, risk-based competency framework. I think it's not a one-size-fits-all or rigid approach, and certainly not in its training courses. And I think the approach to both the framework that you record the use, but also specifically the training, has got to have that flexible approach. And I think as well, interestingly, the European Commission intentionally avoids that prescribing a sort of universal syllabus on AI literacy. I think it is aware the reason for that is you've got a difference between a software developer, an HR manager, a customer in a service industry. And I think we've already touched upon that there's different uses of AI. There's a balance to be struck as well as to where the risks lie. And I think this idea of AI literacy it's using it safely, it's the awareness. So I think what I'd say to that is to respond is to sort of have a 3-step contextual framework. I think I'd probably frame it around roles, risks, and AI use. So, and document the reasoning. The Act refers to competence. And what does that mean? You can't just attend a course and that's enough. If you're not able to use the AI tool safely after attending a course, then the course didn't do its job really. You've not really met your duty either to ensure that competency. But again, it's about balance. It's about using it safely. So if we are enabling use, if you think about it, the more use leads to more competency in itself, and the training of its use just underpins that. And the framework under the competency within an organisation is to document that process. And I think that's what the EU is getting at here. It's looking at this is very new with rapid engagement. All of a sudden, we are using it before we've got a regulatory framework fully in place. And they're sort of seeking to regulate it by those using it by the back door, in effect. And so I would follow all I would do in all EU principles is do exactly that, but within reason.
Yeah, and this it is like it's the Wild West now, right? And I'm reminded of even when I started as a software engineer on the Cambridge Science Park, and it was the internet, and then it was mobile. All these things are like they're the Wild West to start with. This is different, though. This is different because of the recursive and intelligent nature of it. It's just a different technology. You mentioned there, Isabel, about it's about the proof across the organization, and that evidence is so important. So, Isabel, what kind of while we're with you, we move on to number 4 on this like proof of buyers and suppliers. Isabel, which AI warranties and representative protections should buyers be looking for? What should they reasonably seek? in order, where could suppliers create greater liability by promising more than they can actually prove? Because obviously everybody's racing to be the next choice, so the chance of hyperbole is higher. But what should they have in place legally to protect themselves?
Well, we've touched on this already, and Kevin alluded to this on the contractual framework that's just not well documented presently. And I think that's the first starting point here, is to say that standalone or off-the-shelf contracts are no longer going to be sufficient when you're purchasing AI. In that context, and I think you have to explicitly state that the AI product does comply with the EU AI Act, but you've got to sort of be able to properly document and evidence that, and I think you've got to specify the risk classifications and all the company guarantees. And you've got to state that with your supplier. You've got to state what the protections are, and you've got to set them out. There's no avoiding that at all. But there's also that over assurance. The 100% no bias is probably a big no-no. Do not over warranty, I think, is probably my less legal advice on that, is that can be a much more dangerous approach. What if you're able to interrogate what you're using and state what it can do properly, that's a much better place to be, and you comply with the Act. You've probably got a better customer relationship, funnily enough, because you've been transparent, open and honest. So I think in terms of a contractual protection matrix is, you don't want to promise bias-free or perfectly fair algorithms. That's just an overstatement of the truth, and it's just probably best avoided. But also claiming that it's guaranteed EU AI compliance is probably best avoided, as is misrepresenting things like human-in-the-loop capabilities and vouching for clean and fully cleaned training data. I think what you're wanting to put in place is a contractual protection matrix where it states, and I think what you'd want as non-negotiable are things like warranties of an AI Act compliance, the GDPR and data training legality guarantees, and the immediate notification of security or bias clause, because those go to the heart of what's coming in place now. I think there's a lot more to unpick and add to that, but if you're starting that real evidence-based approach to the contractual basis on the purchasing, but also the evidence base on what's being used internally. And going back to what Wendy said about that, I think I'd make it specific to your use case. Don't overthink that. Make it simple, because if you're simple and clear, the transparency of it will be clear. And if you are purely in one sector, keep it to that. And yes, it sounds like a cumbersome approach to something, but actually the benefits to you as a business of all of this are exponential if you think about it, because you're documenting what would be asked for about AI and technology by people like investors, by people like purchasers. So if you are a tech startup, for example, with AI products, this documentation is what those organizations are looking for. And what I've seen is its absence prevents those moving forward, unfortunately. And so actually it's got some beneficial outcomes that will actually be of use in business generally, not just ticking a box for a legal framework that's coming into force on Monday.
Sorry, Alastair, can I just jump in quickly? Isabel, I mean, for me, having real clear enforceable obligations is really, really key, especially around material model changes that a supplier may make. The second thing I just wanted to point out, probably never been more important than to be really clear around exit management provisions in a contract, because of what it's actually doing and what it's delivering. And I think organizations that don't spend that time around that exit provision at the front end of creating a contract, again, are going to have a whole load of issues to try and resolve and unpick, because it's going to be so embedded into organizations. Unpicking it is going to be quite a challenge.
I think you're right, but it's a problem in that the moving rate of AI technology is so rapid. But the one thing I would say is use this as an opportunity to start to put right some of those issues that perhaps haven't been properly dealt with in the past. And I think you're absolutely right on that, Kevin. The absence of it is astonishing at times. And that's the problem from your position and why we need all the training and advice that we do need on it. But what I'm saying is probably doing myself out of a role. It's not the focus on the legal that necessarily is what's so interesting about this. It's the knock-on effect on the good business governance that creates good business outcomes from it that I see as really quite exciting as a move of governments by the EU AI Act. And I think that's a really important point on this tension between over-governance and over-regulation and technical innovation. I think if you over-subscribe to the innovation without the documentation of what's there, you get a free-for-all that could be problematic further on. We're in a state of real innovation and an ingenuity and a change that's disruptive. The legal part of it is crucial, but so is the innovation. And this process of focusing on the documented approach to the innovation of the AI is, I think, quite exciting. As long as it's not overly legal, it gives that outcome for business. Definitely.
Yeah. And at the end of the day, this is about people using this new tool, and since we're talking in this fourth question around selection of suppliers, like Wendy, you know, how should evidence of workforce competence form part of a supplier assurance package? What can suppliers credibly prove?
Yeah, ultimately, that supplier assurance is becoming really important. I think the important around the evidence is that it should really just tell a story. So we know where the AI is being used, we understand who needs what knowledge, we have equipped the people appropriately, and we can demonstrate all ongoing oversight. Because the strongest evidence, in my opinion, isn't a training completion spreadsheet. It's kind of the combination of that visibility, the capability, and the behavioural change, showing that people understand how to use AI well and when to stop and ask questions. As you know, we're filling in quite a lot of tenders, and the question at the moment is, do you use AI? But I think they really should be saying, can you demonstrate that the people using AI are competent and appropriately trained and operating within a governance framework? I think that's maybe the longer question.
Yeah, well, that leads us nicely on to that last question, which is evidence, right? What can businesses actually prove? And the truth is that, you know, if a board, customer, or regulator should be able to ask a question tomorrow, and the evidence needs to be able to be produced, right? So, you know, Wendy, let's start with you. What would you recommend to anybody on the call in terms of what they should be doing in the next 30, 60, 100 days in order to get evidence together of cultural capability and competence with AI?
Yeah. Okay, well, in 30 days, I would say you just need to understand the AI landscape and its peoples and the risks that are happening. And that could include like the initial inventory, like Kevin was mentioning, of where AI is being used, what teams are using it, who's developing or overseeing AI systems, and an assessment of which roles require different levels of AI literacy. And there should be some sort of clear ownership, someone responsible for coordinating the AI literacy and the governance there. After 60 days, I would expect to see some action underway. There might be some learning pathways, guidance for employees on acceptable AI use, targeted training for high-risk functions, such as like HR, procurement, technology, and records showing participation. And you should also have channels for employees to ask questions and report any concerns, and maybe share responsible use cases as well. And then just quickly onto like the 100 days, be able to demonstrate that AI literacy is part of the normal operations. Evidence might include, like we're saying, the policies, leadership reporting, examples of the training and how it's been reducing that risk, and then just keeping that capability current, so that it's not that one-off exercise. And so that's more into the 100 days, but hopefully that's helpful.
It's got very helpful. I mean, there's some absolute juicy nuggets there for our audience. Thank you, Wendy. And it's got to be continuous. And you talked about reducing risk, you know, and compliance isn't just about, you know, saving money and reducing risk. It's about growth. But Kevin, what commercial and operational evidence should leadership expect, you know, on Monday? What should they be demanding on Monday about governance and capability evidence now the act is arriving fully?
Yeah, I guess the key thing, first and foremost, is knowing what AI is being used and where, what data is being used by AI tools, where that's being held, and that AI register, which I talked about. I think that's probably one of the key sort of things that needs to be brought together to have that visibility across the organization. I wouldn't be scared of using AI. My biggest issue is that organizations are introducing AI in a very fragmented environment. Okay, so multiple uses of AI, but it's not in a connected way, and they don't have visibility of it. So from a commercial perspective, the biggest issue I'm going to say, and you'd naturally expect me to say this, is are we actually achieving the benefits from the investment of AI that we know about? Is it connected? Is it telling the truth? Is it connected to the right systems with the right data? You know, bad data going in is going to give you bad data coming out ultimately. So this is why I said right at the very beginning, this is transformational programs. This is not just about turning on an AI tool and thinking it's going to be the best thing since sliced bread. It's not going to be, and it's not going to drive any benefits whatsoever if it's not done properly. So it's also about that vision, strategy, outcomes, benefits. And I agree with what Wendy said around the sort of 30, 60, 100 day. 30 days is around visibility. 60 days about assurance of what you've got and making sure you're really clear and that suppliers know you are going to manage them. And then really driving that measurable control that benefits out from the sort of 100-day onwards, really.
That's super helpful, Kevin. Yeah, thank you. I mean, there's so many things here that Monday is it to be a rally cry, right? So many different areas of businesses that our AI is getting into, and so our ability to understand, you know, the entire organizations. There's a lot of work to do, right? And the risks, the fines are massive. So let's finish this last number 5 with you, Isabel. You know, what evidence would you want to take, or would you recommend business leaders be taking to their board to ensure that AI is under control? What should they be taking to the board on Monday to prove that they've got it handled legally, Isabel?
I think an AI policy alone isn't sufficient, is where I'd start with that. It's just not going to really give the detailed evidence required for the compliance requirements. So I think what EU is asking for is empirical auditable proof of operational control. I completely agree with the inventory idea. I think machine integrated asset inventory that's like a specialized AI catalogue. And I think you want gatekeeping logs as well. If you've specified something that isn't used, you've got to document what and why. And also you've got to evidence the human in the loop. That's specific to the UK AI coming in on Monday as well as those interventions. I think setting out the drift, bias and guardrails as well to show that you've got that oversight. And things like documenting things like a kill switch, that you're in control of what's happening in your organisation. I think as well, I think we're all in this together. Everybody's in the same position. This is all new. What I can say is that there are various organisations within government to help us with our businesses in the UK, despite it being the EU AI Act. And I'd look out for the UK AI Trade Association, what's happening there. There will be a knowledge database to assist with some of these requirements. I'm working on the working group in relation to that and can explain that will be there. But I think exactly that, document evidence, ensure you know what's being used, but do use it, just use it well.
Thank you. That's super helpful. And if people wanted to get in touch with you, Isabel, after the show to talk about any of the points that you've dropped or anything, what's the best way for them to get in touch with you?
Either through my website, which is legalai.it.group, or my email, ibathurst@legalai.it.com. I do come up on Google, apparently, but I'd be very happy to answer any questions direct in the same way. But our organisation is a collaborative one. I partner with other organisations, and I do sit on one of the UK AI Trade Association working groups and select committees. So I've got a group and network that I can point. If I can't answer, I'd certainly point in the right direction.
That's fantastic. Thank you. And what about you, Wendy? If people want to get in touch with you about measuring competence, AI or otherwise, or anything you've talked about, how should they get in touch with you?
Yeah, feel free to contact us on LinkedIn or on our website, which is www.ecomlearningsolutions.com. Actually, on that page, on the homepage there is an AI principles where we set out sort of 5 key principles that we follow. Might be a great starting point for people to look at if they're looking to put a similar type of principle together.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Thank you. And Kevin, what about you? How should people get in touch with you if they want to know more?
Yeah, sure. Just quickly before I provide that details, I think AI presents a huge opportunity, and it certainly presents a huge opportunity across procurement lifecycle and space, and lots of fragmented solutions out there. I think it's about pulling data and being intelligent about the data you're pulling through. And we would be pleased to speak to anybody who's interested in driving forward their procurement teams through the use of AI tools. Through LinkedIn, also email is kevin.bates@quantum-360.co.uk, and the website's quantum-360.co.uk. And it's soon to be relaunched in about 4 to 5 weeks, and it's got a lot of AI technology stuff on the new website coming. Thank you.
Very exciting. Very exciting. You know, I've been an enthusiast forever. I mean, when I read computer science and artificial intelligence at Birmingham in the late 90s, and then had to leave it because it wasn't happening commercially. It was only in the world of academics. So to have it come back and then re-get into it, 4 or 5 years ago, has been, like a bit of a kind of dream come true / circle of life completion for me. So I'm delighted that we're here now, and our audience should all be delighted because all 3 of you dropped some absolutely banging recommendations for immediate practical tips they should go and do. So there's so much that people are going to get from the show and when they watch back as well. So I just want to say thank you very much. The 3 of you brought what I was hoping, which was complementary views across this whole thing. So thank you so much for your time and expertise.
Thank you very much, Alastair.
Thank you, Alastair.
My pleasure. Great. Well, we will leave it there. We'll end the stream. Thank you so much, all of you. Have a cracking weekend. And, this is really a rally cry, isn't it? Monday, we're going to walk in. The EU AI Act is going to have teeth. And if anybody has any, concerns about what's coming, or they don't know what they should be doing next, they can reach out to the 3 of you. They can reach out to me at scalewithai.com or find me on LinkedIn. So it's very exciting. And this is just the beginning, right? Really, it's really just the beginning. So exciting times ahead. Thank you so much for your time. We'll leave it there. Thanks and goodbye, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.